This is part 2 of the series of tutorials for completing the solar video. This is also the second one in stage 1. So by the end of part 1, the first video, we got to creating Mercury and giving it a material. And this was after we gave the sun a point light and so on. And we created a sphere, we called it Mercury, we gave it a material, we gave it a specific position and a scale, and we remembered to disable its sphere collider. And then by the end of that first video, I noticed that the material looked really weird. And by the time I'm recording this second part, I discovered why. It was an error under window rendering lighting. Under environment, I put the intensity multiplier as 6. It looked like this. It looked really like, like burned out. It was supposed to be 0.6. And let me check that in the guide to see if... Yeah, it says intensity multiplier 6, and it needs to be 0.6. By the time I upload this guide, I will fix that. And now, of course, that I changed it to 0.6, I got exactly the effect that I wanted. The point light inside the sun is lighting the part of Mercury that is closer to the sun very brightly, but there's also a very clear contrast with the darker side. Now, the darker side is not 100% dark because we left some environment lighting. Now, the point is that after we do Mercury this way, in other words, create a sphere, create a material for it with a texture that's, usually it starts with 2K and then the name of the planet, making sure that we use the Universal Render Pipeline lit shader, which is like the default for URP. After that, the rest of the few steps, which I hope you're supposed to do without watching this video or join me in the video after you've done them, is to create Venus the same way. Let me double click on it and it takes me to Venus. I gave it the position and the scale that it says in the guide and so on. Let me point out one more thing. If I go to Y, which is to look from above, and I zoom out, I should start seeing where I position them, like, Mercury and Venus and so on. Mercury should be actually 0.5 in scale. It's small, and that's Venus. And the same way I and gave it a material from the Venus 2K and so on. Then the Earth is pretty much the same size as Venus. You can see I already created the moon. Now, the only thing different about the Earth, other than its name, its position, and its scale, and the material, is the fact that as a child of the Earth, I got moon, which also in the guide it tells you what position compared to its parent, which is the Earth, to give it, and what scale. Yeah, the moon is about a third of the size of the Earth. After that, a regular planet, which is Mars. When I zoom out, I want to show you that it's much easier to look at all of this when I'm canceling the perspective, or in other words, flattening the perspective. If the perspective was not flattened, then when I turn it on its side, it would be a little harder to see, for instance, if Mercury was really well lit or not. But if I flatten it, it's much easier. But that's totally up to you. I like to look at it from Y, from above and flat. And that way it's like a floor plan. I can, see if the planets are, in place. Another thing that might help you is to go to a different rendering on the scene window. Right now it's like a fully shaded draw mode, but I can go to something that's a little more draft, or even go to wireframe or complete wireframe, which some people find very, take the colors out of it completely. Does not change the game window, of course, but it's, you might find it helpful for placing them. I like the fully shaded one. After Earth, the Moon, the Mars, Jupiter, same thing. From above, it looks like this. If I hold Option on Mac or Alt on Windows and turn it around, I can see, the typical texture of Jupiter, and it's also very big. It tells you exactly how much. Make sure that for each and every one of them, you give them the right material, but you also disable their collider. After Jupiter, you will see that it tells you to create, let's go to that point in the instructions, I even highlighted it in red, that for Saturn, you don't create a sphere. First, you make an empty game object, which is called Saturn Container, and you give it these following parameters, and here it is, Saturn Container with these following parameters, and then Saturn Container has two children. One of them, let me double click to bring me there. One of them is the sphere, which is exactly like all the others. It's got a material, Saturn matte, based on the texture called 2K Saturn, and so on. And its sphere collider is disabled. Now, the one thing that's different about Saturn is that it's got very visible rings. So the ring, which is this body, let's go over the instructions. The Saturn sphere, same as, all the other planet. But inside the Saturn container, as a child, you create a cylinder. It starts as a cylinder, and we name it ring, and then we apply the following parameters. Don't forget to change the mesh to torus and disable the capsule collider. So when I created this, the mesh, because it's a cylinder, said cylinder, but then I browsed, and instead of cylinder, I chose torus, which is one of the models that came with the teacher's pack. Torus is basically a donut. Now, how do we make it look like a ring? By making it very, very flat. It's 100 by 100 by 5. But if I left it like that, it would stand right in, upright. We needed to lay down, so this is why the rotation is 90. It shows you all the parameters in the screenshot. And it also shows you what the hierarchy should look like. Then the other thing that's different about the ring is the material we're going to create for it. We're going to go back to creating, there's a material. If I go to my materials, I created a material for Saturn ring matte. I'm going to open it and you will see what's different about it. First of all, it goes back to the shader called Universal Render Pipe Unlit, because if it was lit, it would need light to shine on it to show, and I want it to show even in the dark. In other words, like not be affected by light. The other change that happens to it is that the surface type is transparent, because I want to be able basically to see the planet through it. You see how it's transparent? The image itself is half transparent. The blending mode is additive. If it was alpha, it would look like this. If it was multiply, it would look like this. I found that additive is the one that gives me the look that I want. And also the base map is a texture. Let me arrange them alphabetically, which is called 2K Saturn Ring Alpha Vert. Vert for vertical, because originally this torus is standing vertically, and we make it look horizontal by rotating it x 90 degrees. So all these instructions are here. Render face only front. We don't need the inside of the of the donuts to have a texture. Anything else? No, that's about it. Then after that, there's two more planets which don't have anything special about them other than being just a sphere, having a specific position and a specific scale, and a material based on the 2K and then their name, Uranus and Neptune. And once I have Uranus and Neptune, I can look at the whole thing from above. I'm zooming out, of course, with my scroll wheel on my mouse. And I can double click each one of the bodies to take me to it. Earth, Moon, double click on Mars, double click on Jupiter. Just make sure you follow all the instructions. And here's the Saturn container, which has two children, the sphere and the ring, Uranus and Neptune. Just make sure you follow all the instructions, especially the exact numbers. Make sure that when it's a negative, you put a negative and so on. This is pretty much the end of stage one. Those of us who have access to a Quest, that will be a good time to build. You'll be able to fly amongst the planets. Because we have the OVR player controller, and we even gave it a little more acceleration. But of course, the planets are not moving yet, and there's no info yet, and so on, which is why it's a good place to call it stage one. We can at least see the planets, the proportions between them, and so on. Try to build if you have. If not, then we will build when the project is done with the school devices. The planets are still static. Zip the entire project and submit. I'm going to remind everyone that when you zip, if it ends up a zip that's too big for our system, for D2L, too big is more than 2 gigabytes, then try deleting the folder called library and only the folder called library from your project and zipping again, and chances are that then it's going to be much smaller. Good luck, and I will see you in part 3, which will be the beginning of stage 2.